Hi everyone. Today we'll discuss poker probabilities and counting. Most of you might have wondered how exactly poker probabilities are born. Why is a royal flush ranked higher than a straight flush? Why is it better to have a four of a kind and not just a flush, right? So the idea today will be to break this down into bits and pieces and add some math to it. Let's get started. So the first part about probability is about the denominator, right? So the basic formula of probability goes this way, and I guess you might have studied this in school as well. So probability of an event is the number of favorable outcomes divided by the total number of outcomes. That's what we all studied in school. We know that, right? How does this whole logic apply to probability, right? Or probability of poker? Let's start with the denominator. Now, the denominator represents the total number of outcomes. For this, you guys need to know how many cards you need to hold in poker, right? Okay, so in poker, you can have any five cards, right? Out of 52 cards in the deck, you can have any of the five cards. So in combination, this is represented by 52 choose 5, right? So these brackets represent combination, right? This essentially means that you can select five cards from 52. You can select five cards from 52, right? Now, how many ways are these? Let's expand this formula. This formula expands out to 52 factorial divided by 52 minus 5 bracket factorial into 5 factorial, right? So the total number of outcomes is basically 52 choose 5, right? 52 choose 5. 52 choose 5 essentially means that out of 52 cards, you need to pick 5 cards. Obviously, you don't know what cards you'd be picking, but you can choose 5 out of 52 cards. That's clear, right? So this 5 represents how many you need to select, right? And 52 represents the total availability. The formula for 52C5, that is, if I expand this, you get 52 factorial divided by 52 minus 5 factorial into 5 factorial, right? Which is the formula for n choose r, right? This is the formula for n choose r, which is n factorial divided by n minus r whole factorial into r factorial. When you solve this, you get 2,598,960 total hands. This means that in a poker game, you can get one out of the 2,598,960 hands. That's quite a bit, right? And now you realize how important or how rare it would be to pick certain hands. Once this is sorted, all you have to do is to solve the numerator, right? Let's go into solving the numerator because now I've counted the denominator. I know how many cards form the denominator or the total count in the denominator. All I need to do is to sort out the numerator, right? So we'll start with explaining what the different hands are. So now let's describe the different hands in poker. So once we know what the different hands in poker are, we can then go on to describe what the numerator is. We already know what the denominator is. When you divide the numerator with the denominator, you finally get the actual probability. Let's describe the different hands that are there in poker, and we will start off with one pair. One pair essentially means that you have two cards of the same rank, but it can be of different suits. For example, if you have two aces, you can have two sixes or two fives, and that constitutes one pair. The other three cards that you have, remember in poker you hold only two cards. The other three cards on the common deck, right? It's not you can't take and say that this belongs to me. It's a common set of cards that belongs to every poker player on the table. You have two cards that belong to you and only you. The other cards belong to everyone else. You need to mix and match and create your poker hand. So you might hold one ace and let's say one six. That's not a pair. You just have an ace and a six. But let's say that the deck has another ace. You can match your ace with the ace on the deck, on the open deck, and that becomes one pair, right? So one pair essentially can have two aces or two kings. It can be two queens. It can be two sixes, etc. Right? Just as you have one pair, the next is two pair, right? The two pair in a pair, it's easy to guess what the two pair is. If one pair had two cards of different suits of the same rank, here in a two pair you have two different ranks and two pairs of those two ranks, right? So you can have an ace and an ace, a king and a king, or you can have a six and a six, five and a five. So these form two pairs. So you essentially have two separate pairs, not just one, right? It's an implication that comes from the word itself. You have two pairs, right? So two into two, that's four, right? Two into two. So an example line would be ace, ace, king, king, and random card, right? Okay, next let's talk about three of a kind, right? Three of a kind. Again, a very easy thing to remember because you have three of one kind. One kind means one rank. So you can have three aces, you can have three queens, you can have three jacks, right? But and the other two cards can be random. So three and then two random cards. So three cards have to be of the same rank, and then the last two cards can be random. There goes your five card hand, right? Remember, the denominator always has five. The denominator is five. The total number of outcomes we've already calculated. We still haven't gotten to counting these. That's the interesting part. So a three of a kind, an example would be a 6 6 6 and then two random cards, right? All right. Okay. The next poker hand is the straight, right? What does the straight consist of? What does a straight mean? When you're standing in line, it's some sort of a sequence, right? 5 6 7 8 9, or 1 2 3 4 5. Anything else that forms a particular sequence would be a straight. So the idea of a straight is linked to a sequence. You cannot break the sequence. You can't have something like a 3 4 9 10 and a jack. That's not a straight. That's not a sequence. But when you have a sequence of five cards, so when you think of straight, think of sequence of five cards, right? So an example would be 3 4 5 6 7. Remember, these cards can be from any suit. It doesn't have to be of a particular suit. Okay. The next poker hand is the flush. Flush, I don't know where the word comes from, a very interesting word, but flush is essentially saying when you look flushed, when you look pale, flushed out, something like that, where you have a uniform color. When you paint a wall, it you just flush it with a single color. That's what this sort of refers to, I guess. I don't know where exactly the word came from, but flush in poker implies that you have cards or five cards that belong to the same suit. So the key here is same suit, right? Five cards belonging to the same suit, right? So for example, you can have random cards here: one, five, a nine, a king, and an ace. But if all of them belong to the same suit, you have a flush, right? The next poker hand that we'll talk about is the full house. You might have heard of this. It's a super popular hand. It's one of the most more popular hands. Of course, not the best hand yet, but the full house is a pretty interesting hand. Full house is basically a combination of a three of a kind, which we had seen earlier, right? So we'd seen three of a kind earlier. I'll repeat that. So full house is when you have a three of a kind and a pair, right? Let's recollect. What is three of a kind? So a jack, 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 that's three of a kind. That means you have the same rank but different suits. And a pair, the same rank but different suits, right? So just to give you an example, you can have a jack, 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 and then you can have a two and a two. So this would constitute a full house. Remember that the highest rank in poker is the ace, followed by the king, queen, jack, and then you have 10 to 2. Right? The highest rank is the ace. So if I have an ace pair and you have a two pair, there's a difference. I would beat you because I have a higher rank. Right? Okay. The next poker hand that we're going to talk about is the four of a kind. Four of a kind, again, whenever you use the word kind, just as you have in three of a kind, four of a kind implies that what you have is of the same rank but different suits. So, four of a kind is when you have accumulated all the suits, which means you have all the aces in the deck or all the kings in the deck. So, let's say I have all the kings in the deck. You don't care about what the last card is. The last card could be anything. The last card could be an ace. The last card could be a queen. Nobody cares because that's the last card. It's the random card that's left over. This, remember, is a very powerful hand, right? And more often than not, the four of a kind cannot easily be defeated. Of course, there are two more hands coming after this, but this is one of the most powerful hands, right? And the odds aren't as bad as the straight flush or the royal flush, which we will see. And this is still pretty rare, you know. Okay, so the second last hand is the straight flush. The straight flush is when you combine the straight and a flush. We discussed this before. What's a straight? It's a sequence. And flush, remember what I said? It's of the same suit. So if you have something, a set of five cards, which is of the same suit and in sequence, you then have a straight flush. It's just combining these two words. It essentially means that you have properties of both the straight and the flush. So an ace, two, three, four, five of hearts or of spades, this would give you a straight flush, right? We've come to the last possible hand, right? And the king of all hands, the royal flush. Now, when I say flush, we already know what flush is. I'm repeating this for probably the third time. You guys would have gotten bored of it by now. But the flush is when you have the same suit. Now, when you have the same suit and you have the cream of the cards, that is the ace, king, queen, jack, and 10, that is a royal flush. That's the best hand that you can have in poker. Right?